All right, so just real quick, what we're going to go through today, we're going to go through a recap of, why we needed to do reform and what those changes were. We've got some slides in here about how Medicare interacts with auto insurance now as a part of the reform and the choices we can make. We've got some information on the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association, MCCA, their fees, who they are. Then the major case that is going through the courts right now is Andre versus USAA. We're going to talk about that and the repercussions that we see coming. And then there's a couple cases about order of priority that we can talk through. So first up, why did we actually do this, right? We've been working under the same no-fault act since the 70s and with very little change to the law since then. So as we kind of were talking about at the beginning, Michigan really does have one of the highest, if not the highest, rate for auto insurance that our drivers pay. And so, that's a problem, right? We don't need this to be an undue burden for people. So part of the reason why we had the highest costs is because we had the richest benefits. And another part of that is because benefits were so rich, we had this lifetime unlimited. If you were injured in an auto accident, you had benefits forever, right? As long as you needed them. And, like all things, when companies know that they can charge more for something, they do, right? So there were no ways for insurance companies to combat increased charges. So you can see just kind of one little example there, of an MRI bill that would be sent over for just your normal, if you went in for something being wrong, can be, $600-800. But medical carrier sees that, oh, you were injured in an auto accident in Michigan, and they can charge almost just whatever they want for that. So the disparity between the bills was really adversely impacting these insurance companies, which is just not sustainable in the long run. And then where there's seemed to be a lot of fraud and a lot of, lack of containment of cost was really around attendant care and care in the home. If you are severely injured and you need someone there to, come help you get dressed in the morning and to come help feed you and to come, help do any of those normal course of life care duties, then, those are chargeable back on your insurance claim. And we were really just seeing those kind of run wild in the world, and insurance companies needed to get their arms around it. So step in, no fault reform. So what did reform do? One of the main things we all know that it did was it changed our personal injury protection, which is called PIP. Right? Again, like I said, prior to July 1st, the only option we all had was lifetime unlimited medical coverage. We didn't want to take away that option because, quite frankly, it is a very generous, good benefit to have. But we gave people options, right? Everybody loves choices, and that's pretty important. So the options they came up with were continue to allow that unlimited lifetime, 500,000 as a limit for your injuries, 250,000. They have a special Medicaid only option at 50,000. And then they gave people the option to opt out. And there are really just two scenarios that have to exist for you to be able to opt out of the PIP coverage. And that is that you have Medicare Parts A and B. You must have both, and you must show proof of both, or a qualified health plan. So what is a qualified health plan? That's going to be a health plan that states specifically that they will pay in the event of an auto accident, and your health insurance company does need to provide a letter for that, and they all know they do. And your deductible has to be $6,000 or less. So for folks on just a normal plan through their office, Priority Health, maybe you have a high deductible plan of say $4,000. That is generally speaking going to be a qualified health plan. And so with a letter, you're able to opt out of this experience. One of the things to think about as you talk with your agent or look to see how much coverage do I need, what's the right amount? We did a lot of research and did a lot of work to see where did people's claims really fall. And we were finding that, and the insurance companies were finding that, about 96 to 97% of their claims, their injury claims, could be settled for under $500,000. So, when you're thinking about what do I choose, even if you wanted to step down from that unlimited, you know, that was still a pretty good threshold that lawmakers decided to put in there. What else changed? The factors of what insurance companies can look at when they go to set the price for your policy, right? So there's all kinds of different data points that insurance companies look at, you know, even down to, I don't know, what color is the color of your car, which is not real, but, you know, so one of the things the law put together was, hey, here are the factors that we really think are unfair for you to look at when you're charging people setting rate. So you can see things like marital status, home ownership, where you work and where you live. The big one being credit score. Now insurance companies have by and large found a way around that, and they have their own insurance score. So just like a credit score takes in all kinds of information about you and spits out a score, the same kind of thing, an insurance company will take all kinds of information about you and spit out an insurance score, and they just don't use credit necessarily as part of that. So an eroding of the medical benefits. So one of the things in Michigan about no fault is the whole point is no matter who's at fault, we all go to our own insurance. In other states, this works for if you are at fault for hurting me, I go to your policy and I get money from you because you're at fault. In a no fault state, we both go our own ways. However, we do have liability protection for third-party injuries in our auto policies, right? That's called bodily injury. So with this change, they actually eroded some of the no-fault protections, some of those thresholds to say, when can you sue someone? When are you going to be able to collect money under someone else's insurance policy because they were at fault for injuring you? So that question that we got at the very beginning about, you know, assets being protected in the event of a suit of an auto accident is even more critical today, because with reform, they loosened some of those threshold injury language around when you can come after someone else. Just this year, actually just about a month ago, an employee here was in an auto accident, and it was, you know, both parties were at fault, pretty much a 50-50 on who caused the accident. But now under this new law, the gal who works here is actually having the other party file a claim against her policy because there's more of an ability to do so. So now her insurance claim is potentially going to be even higher, which, as we know, affects rates down the line for her. So unfortunately, that was one of the things that got loosened and changed, which is why it's even more important to look at how you've got your assets protected and how much insurance you have. So with that, then the bodily injury limits changed, right? So they set a new standard of $250,000 for injury and $500,000 maximum for accident. We always recommend people stay at those. You do have the option now to buy down to $5,100, and that increased from what it was prior to 2020 as well. And then mini tort, they increased that from $1,000 to $3,000. Very quickly, this is just if you do not carry physical damage coverage on your vehicle and someone else damages your vehicle, you are entitled to get up to $3,000 now from their insurance policy. So if you've heard of PLPD, right, you carry PLPD on your car, you're stopped at a stoplight, someone runs into you, you're not going to get any money from your policy, but you can certainly go back to that person and now get up to $3,000 for your claim. What else did we change? This is now a fee schedule. So this is one of the biggest cost containment measures that has been taken in the state of Michigan to help drive down the cost of auto insurance. And it was around this adoption of a fee schedule. So anyone on Medicare is familiar with the fact that a Medicare fee schedule exists. If you've ever been in a workers' compensation claim scenario, you know, there's a workers' compensation claim fee schedule. So this is a pretty normal thing to think about. And so they, instead of reinventing the wheel, which I always love to work smarter, not harder, the legislature said, okay, we're going to adopt the Medicare fee schedule and we're going to phase that into how we do things. However, because attendant care is not really a part of Medicare, they placed a separate limit on that, saying essentially, now we're going to cap work at 56 hours a week for in-home care. And you can see that language in there talking about some very specific carve outs on that cap of who can be paid, right? A big part of what happens after an auto accident, if you're severely injured, is the care that you're going to need on an ongoing daily basis. And so often that care is put to the burden of family members, right? And so now they're not working because they're home taking care of their loved one. And prior, the insurance company had been compensating them. And now they're saying, hey, we're going to put a cap on that at 56 hours. So that was a really big change. And as we get into this, we're going to see the cases. This is the landmark cases around this attendant care. Then they also changed what's called the order of priority. This is how you can attach to an insurance policy to collect some benefits. And they put a cap on if you have no auto insurance policy and there's no other policy that you can get to pay for you if you are injured in the event of an auto accident, you go back to the state for that Michigan assigned claim plan. And now there's a cap of $250,000 if you find yourself uninsured in an auto accident. Prior, again, remember that was lifetime unlimited. So now they put a cap. Oh, here we go. Ooh, it looks like we got that slide in there twice. No problem. Okay, so the next step here, we're going to talk a little bit about Medicare, right? So again, part of this big change with no fault was how and who is paying for injuries related to an auto accident. And there was a lot of confusion at the beginning around would Medicare pay? And the very simple answer is yes, Medicare will pay if you are injured in an auto accident. They will, however, pay after you have exhausted your auto insurance limits. So we talked before about the different limits. Remember, unlimited, which means your Medicare is really never going to come into play. 500,000, 250, or completely opting out, right? Again, you can opt out if you've got parts A and B, and that is possible. So one of the things that we like to talk about, though, is if you opt out, what does that mean down the line if you are injured? And there are certain things that are not going to be covered under a Medicare policy that are covered under an auto policy, right? So that's lost wages, attendant care, and vehicle and housing modifications. Those are some of the really big gaps right there. I used to be an auto adjuster early on in my career, and one of the claims that the insurance company I worked for had going on was a young girl. She had been injured in the 90s when she was 4 or 5 years old. And, so she was in her 20s when I was there, and we had been paying on her claim all day long. And, she was just moving out on her own, and her auto insurance company paid to have a home completely modified for her to be able to live in that home because she was wheelchair bound as a result of an accident as a child. So that policy is staying with her for life, doing things that, you really just can't buy other insurance to do. So I really tell people to think about, okay, what could that truly mean down the line if I'm really injured? So this next slide here is really talking about what is that out-of-pocket cost for you, right? So let's say you've adopted or you've opted out of PIP. What could that look like from you for a cost perspective? Well, you're still going to have your premium for your Medicare or not, depending on your plan. But now you're going to start to see your out-of-pocket charges and your deductibles starting to come into play. And so here are just, kind of an idea of here are the charges that you would see potentially in the event of an auto accident. Or let's say you chose a limit of 250,000 and the insurance exhausted that. And now, now you're going in to have more work done or continue to receive care. This is a consideration to say, okay, I'm weighing my options between my levels of coverage on my auto plan. What can I expect if I choose to opt for a lower limit or opt out completely? So again, Medicare supplement plans, also referred to as those Medigap plans, they can pay primary on an accident. These services, again, if you're looking at Medigap, you're really going to need to know, okay, is it something that's covered by Medicare? Otherwise, the Medigap is not going to pay, which is true really of how any of those. So again, just things to keep in mind as we're thinking about what are we choosing. Part of no fault reform was a reduction in cost, right, to help bring down those premiums like we were talking about. And That reduction in cost came with some mandated percentage rollbacks on the premium, but really all of those mandated percentage rollbacks for premium, all they were really looking at was the premium charged for PIP, that injury protection part of it. So that's why people didn't see as big a swings down in their premium as they really thought that they did or should have. Okay, so next up, talking about the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association, or MCCA. So what is the MCCA? They are really a nonprofit organization formed to help deal with these high cost situations in auto accidents. And they help act really as a stopgap for insurance companies to say, hey, insurance company, you're going to pay in 2023 the first $600,000 of any injury claim that happens. And after $600,000, we will take on the burden of paying that claim on for this individual should they continue to need it, right? So when we hear about the MCCA and, how they're in debt and how, all those charges that get sent over to them, this is the organization and that's what they're doing. They're helping to set that backstop for insurance companies so they can know their costs and set their rates many years into the future. So every year we all get an MCCA fee assessed on our auto insurance. It's a per vehicle assessment charge. And the next slide, we'll talk about those fees, but a couple important things here, those last two bullet points to say, check out during COVID there, 20 to 21, they had a $5 billion surplus. Well, one of the reasons that we had such a need for reform was the MCCA had been running in the red for decades. They had never been staying above water. And so we needed to reform. Well, we had a whole bunch of money then. And I think everybody remembers those $400 checks that we all got. So we went from the $5 billion in surplus to a $3.7 billion in deficit by year end 2022. So that was a heck of a swing. Those of us in the industry were unfortunately waiting for that to happen because here are those fees that we just talked about. The MCCA fee that is charged per vehicle is adjusted annually. It's always in July, so you can wait to see those come out every year in July. Pre-reform, every person in Michigan who had auto insurance was paying $220 per vehicle in that MCCA fee. That went straight through the insurance company directly to MCCA. Nobody got to keep it. It went right to them. Post-reform, we were down to $100 per vehicle, and that was only if you chose unlimited PIP. There were no MCCA charges if you chose anything under unlimited. Then we got to drop it down even further to $86 per vehicle. So, that 220 dropped to 100. So where most of us saw premium savings on our auto insurance bill, quite honestly, it was that MCCA fee, right? There's $120 up right off the top. So that was why we enjoyed a little bit of savings in 2020. So everything's looking good. We're dropping fees. We get to 2022 and the state decided to issue that refund. So we all got $400 if you had liability at least on your vehicle back. Well, what did we do? We gave away more money maybe than we should have. Now see $3.7 billion in debt. Now today, coming out in a couple months, the fees will once again go up. And now we're seeing them add a fee on even if you have opted out. So for folks who have opted out, chose a lower limit, you had not been receiving this charge before. Now all of those vehicles will see a $48 charge going forward after July 1st. Okay, so there's all the reform we did. Now what happened? Because there's always consequences to change, right? And like I had alluded, the biggest one is around this attendant care, right? So the big issue was, what are we doing retroactively here? The law was very clear on injuries occurring after the law goes into effect. But what about between when the law was signed and when it goes into effect, right? People saw this interesting little gap here of, what do we do? Are we still covered on the unlimited? Are we covered on the 56 hours of attendant care, right? There was just this weird little gray area that happened. And the reduction in benefits, I mean, it's a 45% cut, right? This attendant care is not, these are real dollars. That's a huge cut to what insurance companies were willing to pay. So this started to put a lot of unease out into the marketplace for people. And then we entered into the Andrew case. So I know there's a whole lot of text on here, and you can feel free to read it, but the gist of this case is saying the insurance companies started paying after July 1st. They said, hey, we are now incurring a cost for this attendant care. It's post July 1st, it's post reform. And so now we are going to apply the new fee schedule to that bill that you just sent me. And all the providers were like, wait, no, just a second, please, because this person was injured prior to the law change. So they should be grandfathered in on all benefits prior to the law change. And the insurance company said, no, we don't believe that to be the case. Now, the law was unfortunately a little bit silent on this. There really wasn't any specific language saying yes or no. Did we intend this to go retroactively, or did we intend this to be truly like go forward? Everybody is on the same one. So, you know, lawsuits ensued. There were a whole bunch of them around this. All of the other cases that have been filed in conjunction around this attendant care have either all been put on a stay or dismissed, really pending this Andrew case here, because it was sent all the way up through the courts in Michigan, and it is actively right now in the state Supreme Court. They started hearing oral arguments in March, and so this case is truly, truly active right now, and we're expected to get a ruling on it later this summer. So for anyone who has read articles in the news around home healthcare companies, right? We've been hearing home healthcare companies really struggling and having a hard time since reform. And this is why, because overnight they saw their costs get reduced by 55%, their payments to them. So imagine you wake up one day and all of a sudden your business is operating on 55% less of what the attended revenue was. That was a big problem for them. You know, the other side of this is if it's real care for people, right? I don't know if there's any Red Wings fans on the webinar with me today, but for those of you who remember Konstantinov, who was in a very terrible auto accident back many years ago, this is really impacting him, right? He's been a big advocate in this, saying, you know, I have attendant care and now this is not enough money to pay for it. And, you know, his attendant care nurse has come out to say he would have probably passed already had this coverage and this money not been available to him. So this is affecting real people, and it's a real important issue for us to get our arms around. Okay, so what else has changed? The other unintended consequences, right? We talked about the pre-reform uninsured drivers had access to that assigned claim plan, right? Remember I said there was one little bullet point down there saying now it's a $250,000 limit. So we had an injury that, or, you know, they were curious what happens in that gap, right? So the state company that runs this, they sued saying that people should be capped to that 250 once the law was passed and before it went into effect. The courts, I think rightly, quite frankly, said, no, that's not the case. You need to continue to provide the same benefits just because the law has been signed. It's not in effect yet. But that was something that had to work its way through the court, right? Oops, sorry, my light has turned off really quick. Right, so that was something that needed to work its way through the court. And again, I think they correctly decided, no, those people should be entitled to those unlimited benefits, even though it was post-signing but pre-reform or pre-implementation. So we had another case here that is important. This is around the order of priority. So the Michigan Head and Spine versus Mid-Century Insurance here. So what happened was very clearly this person was injured after reform went into effect, but they were a passenger in the vehicle. And as a passenger, they did not have their own auto insurance. So pre-reform, injury for that passenger would have eventually attached to the policy of the driver of the vehicle. Now, post-reform, they have worked out a different way, and that person's actual remedy is to go to that MCCA, right, to go to the placement facility and they administer the claim. And as we talked about now, those uninsured drivers have a cap of 250,000 versus the unlimited. Well, in this case, the insurance company that had the policy on the vehicle she was riding in, they hadn't had their language updated in their policies yet. The insurance companies didn't really get to see this reform before it came out. We all learned about it at the same time as everyone else, quite frankly. And so, getting those forms turned around and changed takes a minute. And the injured party said, hey, I should get these benefits. Your policy wasn't updated. The insurance company said, no, we need to follow the law of the land. And actually, by the time it went through court and the appeals court, the courts did side on the side of the insurance company to say, no, we do have to follow the prevailing law of the land. Just because the insurance policy didn't necessarily get all the way updated here, that's not the intention of what we're doing. So that was ruled in favor of the insurance companies. So really, that's kind of it, right? This Andrew case is really the landmark case that we have to wait and go through. There's been some other just really weird, frivolous lawsuits around this, like there is for everything. For example, when I was out looking up other different cases to talk about today, former Mayor Mike Duggan is suing the state over this, saying, auto prices are too high, and he's got a bunch of people attached onto that, and everybody expects that case to be dismissed because he's saying we should just completely get rid of no fault reform altogether, which is just not going to be the case. But really, this Andrew case, like I said, this is the big one. So we're waiting to hear how this will affect the industry. The reduction in payout for attendant care, that's going to continue to drive people out of business and increase costs, right? With any change, we've got to recalibrate. So, we're likely to see home health care agencies who were truly focused in on just providing care for auto insurance victims to either go out of business or have to come up with a pretty big pivot and how they help and provide care and which clients they take on. But then the big thing for us is we're going to continue to have choice, right? I mean, all of these things we talked about, it's money, it's dollars, it's for everybody, it affects all of our pockets. But these are real people who are injured, and we do have access to really good benefits in this state. I mean, there's no other state in the country that has this lifetime unlimited care for the cost that you can get it. So, just I guess some anecdotal things that I've seen over the years, right, where people will come in and we'll talk about, all right, we've got this unlimited option, what's the cost to get down to 500,000, for example. And, we're looking at 100 to 150 bucks maybe for an average family of 4 people over any given year. Well, for $150 a year, are we going to lower our limits, or are we going to say, hey, we want to have everything available to us if we're injured in an auto accident? So it's something I encourage everybody to talk to their agents about. Yep, there we go. Everybody to talk to their agents about, right? Especially as costs do continue to go up. We've got to make choices in our houses around where we want to spend our dollars and what's most important to us. It's easier to get sued. And so, I encourage you to look at, how do I get additional liability protections? How do I get that umbrella liability policy? How do I make sure I have high liability limits on my auto insurance? Things like that, to really look at how do I protect myself the best should the worst happen. So with that, you've all heard my voice go through all those slides enough. Chris, it's good to see you again there. I'm happy to take any questions, weird, off the wall, anything, doesn't matter. Bring it on.
So, can you talk about insurance if you're loaning someone or your car or borrowing someone else's vehicle?
Yep. So the way it works in Michigan is if you give someone permissible use of your vehicle, if I say, hey, Chris, you're more than welcome to take my car and drive down the street to go pick up that soda you've been talking about, my insurance follows Chris around. So if she damages my car, my policy pays for it. Now, if she is injured, her policy pays for her injuries. So that's the exception there. For your injuries, your first order of priority is back to your own personal insurance policy. So that makes a big difference.
But if I'm uninsured, the most I can get is that $250,000.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. And really quickly, before we kind of jump into the next one, the other thing, anyone who rides motorcycles has family who does, actually, personally, I think this is where we're going to start to see more litigation or actually amendments to the law, because motorcyclists, how it used to work before is if you were involved in an accident with a motorcyclist, regardless of fault, right? You could have a motorcycle just absolutely T-bone you. That motorcyclist injuries were on your insurance policy. They got your benefits. Well, now let's think about if I opt out and a motorcyclist and I are in an accident, there's nothing he can get, right? There's nothing that they can get off of my policy from a benefit perspective. And so now they were in a weird loophole and they never addressed the loophole in the legislative update. So I expect that to honestly be the next big change to this, is how this affects motorcyclists.
I'm not sure what it says. My health care is from the VA. Does that qualify?
I have had one other client work through with the VA, and we had just a really difficult time getting them to provide any sort of letter that said that they would pay primary in the event of an auto accident. And so my client ended up, they also had Medicare available to them. And so, we ended up pivoting and going the Medicare route. But that one has been tougher in my experience to get them to provide the letter. Because remember, for that qualified health plan, you have to show the insurance company. And we've all been getting all this paperwork every year too, right? Where you think, well, this is a lot more paperwork to fill out than I thought before. That is something you have to turn in every year if you've elected any option less than unlimited. So you have to keep showing the proof. So that can become difficult if it's hard to get it.
So next question, I'm on Medicare now. Why is my insurance a higher price?
I'm assuming they mean the auto insurance. So, again, the cost reduction that was touted under reform, as insurance agents, we were a little bit bummed to hear how it was communicated, because it was not communicated, I think, as clearly as it could have been. The cost reduction were not on your bottom line premium to say, hey, because I think it was like 15% reduction that you would see if you chose, that first option down that 500,000. Well, it was a 15% reduction on just the premium that they charge for PIP. So for example, I helped a retiree this past week, and for him and his wife, and they had 2 vehicles, their unlimited PIP for the year, the whole charge for it was $350. Okay, so you take 15% off $350, and we're just really not seeing that big of a savings that the change purported there to be. That's why I made that comment. It was really that MCCA fee reduction that was why we saw any change, and now we're seeing that go back up.
It seems like just to reduce it, and again, as you said, every situation is unique, but there's not that much of a cost savings for the potential liability that could be down the road, either your fault or not.
True.
Yeah. What is mini tort and how can I use it?
Yeah, good question, because this is a really good one. It's mini tort is if your vehicle does not carry physical damage, right? So a liability only PLPD, and you are involved in a not at fault accident and you know who the person is. So this is not my car was hit in a parking lot and I don't know what happened. This is truly, you are filing a claim on the at fault person's insurance policy. So again, I have PLPD on my car, I'm stopped at a red light, someone comes up and rear ends me, and I am entitled to up to $3,000. Now, there has to be $3,000 worth of damage. They don't just cut you a check for it, right? If they can fix it for $1,500, they're going to fix it for $1,500, but you're entitled to up to $3,000 if you only carry liability on your vehicle. And I mean, as early as in I would say the early 2000s, it was only $1,000 or $500, excuse me. So now it's up to $3,000.
This is a good one. I was in an accident in 1978 with injured their teeth. Will the no fault still be the same as I had before this insurance change, as he will be needing or she will be needing more help with teeth worth done in the future?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, you are still entitled to the unlimited lifetime because your injury happened prior to reform, clearly. For you, the Andrew case becomes particularly important if down the road ever attendant care becomes necessary, because this is what they're deciding from a fee schedule and implementation, reducing those benefits payable on your behalf. So let's say you needed to have someone come in, for a couple hours a day to help prepare food differently to make it easier to eat, something like that. That could potentially affect how many hours a week you're able to get paid under the insurance, and what amount they'll pay. But from the true like medical bills, going to see the doctor, that sort of thing, no, none of that should change.
Is another good one. When should you move your children to their own auto insurance policy? I have children in their early to mid-20s.
So that's a really good question and kind of something I didn't dig into. One of the more minutia points within no fault reform was talking about household members and making sure household members truly are members of your house, and whether or not then they're entitled to coverage. So what we're saying is if your adult child does not live with you, like really they do not live with you, they need to be off your auto insurance, right? If they're, out in college and they're working out there and they're going to school out there and, they're really kind of, they've got their life kind of established somewhere else out of the state, or out of your house, then that's the time to start looking at it, because the reform took and said, okay, if they're not really in your household anymore, even if you're paying premium for them, this is not the right policy for them. They are not a true household member, and we're going to try and deny the claim. We have yet to see, to my knowledge, any real litigation around this, but this is another area that I really suspect is going to cause some problem for us down the road, and really defining better what a household member is. They did a good job for military people away, but I would recommend, it's more important now to get people on their own policy if there's any sort of gray area between are you a household member and are you not, because you could be leaving your children then a real gap in coverage. They could just have no coverage, quite frankly, on your auto policy if they're injured. So it's more important than ever to get them off.
Well, that's interesting, because when my kids were in college, they remained on mine.
Yep,
auto insurance,
traditional
but
away at school is still fine. Traditional away at school is truly still fine. It's when you're maybe looking at, I've seen insurance companies start to change their mind around graduate school, for example, right? Because now they're saying, hey, you're a more established adult, really kind of out in the world. So, I've seen them start to say, hey, we don't want them on this policy anymore. And that's some of that reason, that gray area between household member.
yeah. Next question. How about TRICARE? Is that one of the insurance?
I think that's a Medicare product specifically by someone. I mean, if I'm getting that right, again, you would just want to talk to that healthcare provider to say, hey, can I get a letter that says that this is a qualified health plan and will pay in the event of an auto accident. And if you can get that, then that makes you eligible for any opt-out.
So follow-up question to the adult child. So if the adult child is working in another state, should they have their own auto insurance?
If they really do live there and are working there, then yes, they should. And if they're in another state, quite frankly, they probably would pay less for their insurance, because they're not going to be in Michigan, where we do pay more for auto insurance. So looking over the registration of that vehicle to them, title or registering, plating it in that other state is ultimately in the long run going to be less cost and the right way to do it.
Are the insurance companies reimbursing skilled nursing facilities at the Medicare fee schedule?
Yes, that is a part of this.
So how does that affect a family?
So, again, this is gonna affect what they would have to pay, out of pocket, right, for the per diem or however it is that they end up getting charged. And then thinking about going forward, right, of looking at, for you, let's say, somebody's injured next week. If you've opted out or at a lower level, you can run into caps now on skilled care, or on really the whole claim. And then, if you're opting out, is it going to be paid out underneath a health insurance plan? Or is it going to be paid out under your Medicare? One thing that I didn't bring up, and I caution people too. So let's say you're, like me, I'm under my employer sponsored health plan. And if I choose to opt out, and then I am severely injured, then, now I am not going to be able to work, and I don't have the health insurance coverage under my auto insurance. And if I lose my job because I can't work, I've now lost my health insurance, which was what I had paying under my auto accident. And so now you could run into gaps of saying, okay, then when can you get on something like Medicaid or some sort of state funded assistance that way? But I think that that's something that people maybe aren't thinking about in the long term, to say, what happens if I lose my job as a result of this? If I'm really so severely injured, if I'm counting on that health plan. Another piece of it is let's say you change jobs. You've got somebody who opted out because their health insurance paid for it, and 4 years go by, they don't think about it, they change jobs. Well, it's written into the statute to say you have 1 year to tell us that that's not true anymore for you. And after that year, if you don't tell us, we're not going to pay anything. You've got to go to the state, and then you could be completely uninsured after a year if you don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
So, but that's not a thing as Michiganders that we're used to thinking about, because we never had that. So, I worry about that too. We try and educate people. Okay, if you opt out, you really need to tell us if something changes for you, because after a year, you could be uninsured completely.
Next question is, when I retire and have no income, will my insurance be reduced as my income will not have to be replaced? That's a good one.
That is a good one. I guess the unfortunate, very short answer is no. If you wanted to choose a lower limit, like let's say we went from unlimited to 500,000, the best they can do is, say, hey, that would be an increase in cost. You can buy additional attendant care, additional lost wage protection if you buy a lower limit. But no, unfortunately, they're not going to take that into consideration.
Okay. Those were some really great questions.
Those were some good questions.
Yeah. So I'm gonna launch a poll, because we always like to get feedback on our presentation. So I'm gonna do that now, and I'll be sharing those with Shannon after the presentation. And I want to thank you so much, Shannon, for sharing your expertise. If anyone has any questions, Shannon's information is there if you want to review your insurance and have her give you her opinion and look at what they have to offer. Feel free to reach out to Shannon. This presentation was recorded and will be available on our website for you to look back on or share with family and friends. So if you guys could answer the poll, that would be great.
Right.
Really
and just
appreciate
a quick
that.
Thanks to Chris and Carrier Law for the work that you guys do, and for having me here today. It's been a pleasure to help present some of this and answer all your questions. And, like Chris said, there's my contact information right there. You're welcome to reach out at any time. We have a whole team of people who work on home and auto insurance all day, every day. So we're here to help you on any questions or anything you want to know.